So welcome to today's presentation all about iOS Management 101. My name is Nick Thompson and I'm with Jamf Software here, and I'll be taking you through the world of iOS. iOS is one of those great things that a lot of organizations are deploying but are having trouble kind of just getting a hold of it. So I want to take you through kind of the 101 aspect of it, getting started with managing iOS. So let's look at the details here. What we're going to cover is we're going to do a little bit of an overview first of the Casper suite. Not everybody out there is completely familiar with our product, so I want to just provide a quick overview of it. We're going to talk about the benefits of standardizing on a platform like iOS for your organization. Then we're going to talk about the benefits of mobile device management, or MDM as I'm going to call it. And then we're going to talk about some best practices for doing iOS deployments for your company. And then finally we'll wrap up with some Q&A. So let's do a little overview of the Casper suite, since again, not everybody is quite familiar with our product here. First off, we are Jamf Software, and we help organizations succeed with apps. That's our tagline. It's printed right on our wall. And we've been managing Macs really since 2002, long before they were popular. And when iOS devices first had the ability to be managed, we were right on that as well too. Now, how do we manage all these devices? Well, that's with our product. Our product is called the Casper Suite. And the Casper Suite is really a set of administrative tools to help you manage all of your Apple devices. At the heart of this suite is something that we call the JSS, or the Jamf Software Server. That's really the management server component. And it also includes a number of applications that help you run Mac management, and those are for building packages, for deployment, remote access to client machines, as well as enrollment. I'm not going to focus too much on the Mac side of things again, because we're focusing on iOS today, but just so you know that it's out there, these tools are for Mac management, the apps that you see kind of at the top there. But then it also includes a number of applications for your end users, such as Casper Focus and Self-Service. Casper Focus is kind of more for the education world. Self-Service will really focus on today here. All of these really together make up the Casper suite. Now, the JSS, or the Jamf Software Server, really just acts like a web browser which communicates to your devices. And that JSS, the server, can really run on an OS X, Windows, or Linux server if you're doing an on-premise deployment. So if you'd like to use one of your existing servers that you have in your network, you can absolutely host our software there on your server. We also offer a service where we can host this for you all up in the cloud. And we see a lot of organizations moving towards this trend, as it's just easier to use and less things to maintain from a network infrastructure side of things. For anyone paying attention at home, we happen to use Amazon Web Services for our Jamf Cloud. So if those are all kosher with your security practices, it's a really great way to go. That's about all that we're going to focus on the back end of the Casper suite here in this webinar, but I also want to mention our user-facing app that's a part of the product. You know, Apple's really famous for focusing on the end user experience, and frankly, we're going to shamelessly copy that philosophy. Once a device is set up and enrolled in the Casper suite, they get an app installed on their devices called Self-Service. And self-service is really just like an internal app store that can be populated with all the resources that IT wants all of your users to have. They could be things like apps, or they could just be configurations, or they could even be links to helpful resources. On the Mac, you can even add scripts and printers and a whole lot more. Really, with self-service, you are truly empowering your end users by putting them first. And just a little bit of history here. Apple's operating systems have evolved a lot over the past 15 years here, and iOS has really brought this new wealth of products that it runs on, it's really also paved the way for annual releases. In fact, Apple's even introducing new operating systems based on iOS for their watch and even for their TV products. Really, the pace of innovation has been amazing to see, especially considering that mobile device management here was introduced around iOS 4.1, so in between 4 and 5 there, with the iPhone and the iPad. And Jamf, of course, has been alongside Apple this entire time, releasing products of the Casper suite to support Apple's new operating systems, either on the same day that they're released or even before sometimes too. And of course, iOS 9 and El Capitan was no exception. So now we have a little bit background on the Casper suite. I want to talk about standardizing on iOS. So why iOS? iOS really boasts a really intuitive user experience. It's got a secure ecosystem of business-ready apps and built-in tools that are really meant to empower users to be more productive than ever before. iOS is really the only platform that's out there that's designed with consumers in mind, but that's been embraced by the enterprise. And we can dive into some of these details here. iOS has the fastest and most efficient mobile hardware out there. Ever since Apple moved to the A series processors, they've just been incredibly fast, and it's really been a boon for Apple. iOS has native hardware-based encryption to keep everything safe, keep your data safe on your devices. In addition to that, they've also added things like Touch ID for biometric security. The Touch ID sensors on these new devices are just incredibly fast and very accurate, and they don't actually store any fingerprint data up in iCloud. It's all stored locally on the device in a very secure way. And there's apps. There are so many productivity apps to create documents, including Microsoft Office for iOS. If you haven't checked out Word, PowerPoint, or Excel for iOS, I'd highly recommend downloading it. Apple, of course, has built-in support for modern secure wireless networking, including VPN and single sign-on, 802.1x. And of course, Apple has support for mail servers, right? Most famously, Microsoft Exchange. So you can just plug in an Exchange account right into the native mail app and get access to all your corporate data. Now, businesses are choosing iOS as well too. According to a recent report from Harris Poll, the links are at the very bottom of the slide if you want to check these out for yourself. Enterprise mobility is going to top IT investment in 2016. And the survey really reveals that more than 90% of IT decision makers will see enterprise mobility as a crucial function for customer engagement, competitiveness, and operational productivity in 2016. Now, we here at Jamf, we also conducted a survey recently among IT professionals, and we found that 81% of companies are choosing to support iPad compared to a little bit lower numbers for some of the competitors to iOS. And 84% of companies are supporting iPhone, again, to some lower numbers to the competitors to iOS there. So businesses are not just simply choosing any mobile technology to support their workforce, they are adapting iOS at increasing rates because it's preferred by their users, it's easy to manage, and it's secure. It's really clear that iOS is becoming the choice for businesses. So, of course, everyone wants to know, well, what about Android, right? And Android's a fine operating system. It's really risen in popularity due to a wide variety of factors. It's highly customizable. There's a large kind of wealth of different devices, and Android can be good for consumer programs or BYOD programs, but for the enterprise, however, it can be difficult to standardize, especially due to its fragmentation. This little graph here shows iOS adoption on the left and Android adoption on the right, and these are pulled directly from Apple and from Google. Apple has over 94% of its users on the two newest operating systems, that's iOS 9 and 8. In contrast, though, Android only has less than 30% on its two new operating systems. That's Lollipop and Marshmallow. This can be really problematic and for companies and could lead to a lot higher risk. Additionally, Android has had recently had to battle some mobile viruses and malware because of the minimal review process that Google has for their App Store. Nefarious developers have been known to upload an app that looks very similar to a popular one, but once it's downloaded, it can be used to steal data. The presence of such a large number of Android viruses really forces IT organizations to craft a mobile antivirus strategy if you're deploying Android, which can be very costly and time. It costs you both time and money. So we see not many organizations choosing to deploy Android because of these reasons. So now let's talk about mobile device management, the benefits of mobile device management. Now that you're kind of seeing, let's choose to go down the path of iOS, we need to manage these devices somehow. And a very big part of this thing is something called the Apple Push Notification Server. Whenever you send commands to an iPad or an iPhone, the MDM server, in our case we're going to use the JSS here, talks to Apple's Push Notification Server, or APNS for short, and that APNS maintains a constant connection to your devices so you don't have to. The iPad then communicates back to the JSS and receives any commands or apps or configuration profiles that you send it. At the heart of it, this is the architecture for mobile device management, or again, MDM as we're going to call it. Now, these three things aren't the only thing that MDM can do. In fact, with MDM, you can do a lot more. It can help you deploy all of your iOS devices to your users. You can keep track of everything with your inventory. You've got these profiles, which we're going to dive a little bit deeper into. And we've got these commands that you can send to these devices. And of course, you can deploy apps. And finally, you can make them all secure. At the end of the day, what does this really add up to? Well, the benefit of MDM is that you are enabling your users while also ensuring compliance for your organization. So let's dive into these ones. We're going to tackle each one kind of one by one here. When we start off with deploy, the first step of device management is always enrollment. And the Casper Suite offers several methods for enrolling iOS devices. Apple has a free app called Apple Configurator, which you can leverage for enrollment. However, this method really relies on a physical connection via USB. And for over-the-air, you can either allow your users to self-enroll via a private website or URL that our JSS generates for you. Or, frankly, you can leverage Apple's device enrollment program for DEP. Device enrollment program, or known as DEP, for what's known as zero-touch configuration, really by automatically enrolling these devices on the first boot up. DEP is really the way to enroll devices moving forward now, since it works so smoothly and just automates everything for you. DEP is available in a lot of countries, and I'd highly recommend to just make sure that your country is supported. You can check out the program at deploy.apple.com, and if it's not supported yet, you can use those other two methods to enroll your devices to deploy them. But I really want to focus on DEP since it is really the future of where Apple's taking us. And I want to show you what this looks like here. So when you hand a user a new iPad for the first time, it can be shrink wrapped in its box, and all the user needs to do is boot it up, and it's going to enter the familiar setup assistant that your users see, which looks like this here. Now, an important part of this enrollment process is the fact that these devices need to talk to the internet. And if you know iOS and if you know wireless networks, you kind of know that sometimes you need a password for these things. I'd highly recommend, if you're kind of deploying these things en masse, having a guest network available where the Wi-Fi password is really easy, or even just have a password enforced Wi-Fi network just for the sake of enrolling these devices. And then you can push out a Wi-Fi profile down the road for your secure network. Once they talk to the network, then the iPad is flagged for DEP enrollment. And they're going to get a screen that looks like this. It says, your organization will automatically configure your iPad for you. The user simply tap next, and then the MDM profile is then installed on the device. And this is what really makes the magic happen for enrolling and managing the device moving forward. Additionally, you can tell it to skip a lot of the normal setup screens that you see. You'll notice that you didn't see like the terms and conditions or the Apple ID screen or the Touch ID screen, and those can all be skipped, and those can all be configured ahead of time. Then once the user just simply taps the Get Started button, the iPad is enrolled and it's ready for management. And they can do things like these profiles and commands that we'll touch on. For inventory, MDM is capable of querying an iOS device to collect a large amount of inventory data, really ensuring that you have the most up-to-date device info that can really make informed management decisions. So what can you collect? Well, you can collect a lot of things at the hardware level. So you can see the device type, the device model number, the serial number, the UDID, if you're familiar with that. It collects a lot of different things. That's all part of the hardware of these devices. It also collects information about software, so you can know what version of iOS that these devices are running. A new version just came out, 9.2.1, that fixes a few bugs, and it'd be good to know what version of OS that all of your devices are running. It'll show you what apps are installed, even the free space and the storage capacity of these devices. It'll show you some management status, so it'll say if it's enrolled or not enrolled. It'll talk about if it's supervised or not supervised. Supervision is a level of management, a special kind of mode of iOS that you can set your devices into that enables even deeper management. And it will show you a bunch of other things too, like what profiles are installed, if you have certifications or certs installed, and it'll show you like activation lock status, etc. You can even pull in purchasing info. We tie into Apple's Global Service Exchange, or GSX, to pull in purchasing info of your devices. It really makes it easy to manage the life cycle of these things. When you add all these things up, what's the benefit here? Well, the benefit is that you as the IT admin, you're going to be informed about your inventory, and you're going to be able to take action. This inventory is actionable for you. So you could set up groups that say, look for all devices that are running iOS 8 or lower, and then you can take action on those devices. So when we look at what can you do to modify iOS, or what can you do to configure iOS, these are configuration profiles. Profiles really give you the ability to tell your device how they are supposed to behave, or kind of like the recipe for these devices. While you had to once manually configure these, MDM really allows you to automate this process for doing things like passcode, Wi-Fi, VPN, and more. So what do these profiles look like? Well, I kind of organized them into different categories here for us. We kind of have to start off with the basics, so you can do things like set a passcode policy on here to require a passcode on these devices. You can set up a large number of restrictions, and when I say restrictions, these are things that are like disabling the App Store, or disabling Safari, or disabling the camera, or disabling some kind of minutia details that are in the settings. They're like not allowing apps to open up certain documents, things like that. You can pre-configure Wi-Fi networks. So as I was saying earlier, you want maybe like an open Wi-Fi network for just booting up the device and rolling it, but you probably have a corporate Wi-Fi network that you want your users to connect to. You don't ever have to give out the password for your Wi-Fi network. You can just bake it into this profile and push it down to the devices, and they automatically kick over then to your secure network. In addition, you can do the same thing for VPN. Other things that you can set up in profiles, you can do accounts. And by accounts, I mean mail accounts. So if you're using POP or IMAP or probably more likely Microsoft Exchange, you can configure all those accounts right in here so that when the user boots up to the device, all they have to do is type in their Exchange password, and everything's taken care of. All the settings are taken care of them for them. You can also do some things with the internet in terms of filtering and proxies and domains. And Apple has some advanced settings as well too for setting up, AirPlay or web clips are kind of nice, where they're like a little mini app. They're essentially like a bookmark on your device. And what does this all mean? Well, it really means that you get consistent configurations across all of your devices here. In addition to profiles, you can do things also called management commands. And these are specific actions that you can apply to these devices to ensure security in corporate data. What kind of things can you do? Well, from the device level, you can do things like remote locking a device or remote wiping, the dreaded situation of, oh no, my executive lost their device in a taxi and I need to wipe it now. You can do this, and you can always know that these devices are going to be wiped by sending out a management command to them. From the software side of things, you can do things like clearing the passcode. So if somebody forgot their passcode, that you can just clear it for them. You can even set the wallpaper on these devices. And a brand new one here with, if you're running at least devices that are running iOS 9, and if you're enrolling them using DEP, you can now send a command to tell the devices to update to the newest version of iOS. You can't block iOS updates, but you can at least now send a command to make sure that they are up to the newest version. Other commands that you can do, you can unmanage a device, so if you're sunsetting something, you can make sure it's no longer managed. You can even send push notifications, or you can bypass the activation lock. This is sometimes a very sticky point for IT. If you get a device back where the user has logged into their Apple ID, and as long as this device has been pre-enrolled and everything beforehand, you can actually bypass that activation lock. So as long as you have a lot of things in place beforehand, you can bypass that lock, which is really handy. What does this mean? Of course, it means security and compliance for your devices. What happens if it's lost? What happens if you want to be on the newest version of iOS? Or what happens if you need to bypass that activation lock? Security and compliance. Next, app deployment. So really, out of the box, iOS devices, they really serve a great communication device. But the device can really help your employees achieve so much more by utilizing the great selection of apps that are out there. The App Store is really amazing. Apple has a really healthy App Store ecosystem with developers contributing over 1.5 million apps that are out there, and Apple's paying them really well too. They've paid out $40 billion to developers. It's a really amazing ecosystem that's going on. In addition to the App Store, well, you also have the ability to do some custom apps for iOS. And really, the most innovative companies out there are building their own custom apps that you can either build yourself using the Swift language that Apple's developed, or you can kind of partner up with apps that are out there using Apple's B2B App Store or leveraging IBM. IBM's deployed out over 100 vertical specific apps that you can partner up with IBM to really revolutionize processes inside of your organization. So how do you deploy these apps if you decide to go down this route of doing app deployment, which I highly recommend that you do? We'll use something called Apple's Volume Purchase Program, or VPP. And this allows you to buy apps in bulk from Apple. And you have a few different ways to deploy these things. You can either give your users codes which transfer the ownership to them, or you can license apps to your users as well too, so the organization retains control of it. And Apple now even allows you to either deploy them to a user's Apple ID, or you can deploy them directly to a device. So that means your Apple ID strategy can either be having Apple IDs or not at all. Um, there's a lot to volume purchase program. I'm not going to dive too deep into it, and I highly recommend if you're really interested in the details of VPP, reach out to us or check out some of our other webinars that we have. In addition to, once you kind of deploy these apps out, then these apps can be managed apps. And this is really interesting. It's app level control for IT. It really kind of flags an app as being owned by an organization. And you can do some neat things with it. You can pre-configure it so that login steps can be skipped in certain apps, and you can control the flow of app data. You can say this app can only open up certain documents, or this app can only receive certain documents. It's known as managed open in, and it really just gives you more security on there. But when you kind of add up all this stuff of app deployment, it really means that you are empowering productivity for your users. Now, lastly, on security, of course, security and privacy concerns are very real for organizations. And iOS has a number of security features that are built right into the operating system. And coupled with MDM, you can really ensure your devices are not only secure, but your apps and your network are as well too. Apple has built-in encryption on these on their iOS devices, 256-bit hardware-based, and it's turned on automatically once you have a passcode on there. So it's really important to set up a passcode policy to enforce the passcode. Then encryption is automatically turned on, and you won't be able to really notice a difference at all. There's VPN available, of course. There's a built-in client. It supports all the popular protocols. And you can even do something called per-app VPN, where you can tunnel just one app's data over VPN. And of course, they have Touch ID for security as well too, for fingerprint sensor to really ensure that secure passwords can be used, but the user can log in very quickly. So that's kind of a summary of the benefits of mobile device management there. And next, I just want to talk about some of the best practices for doing an iOS deployment, and then we'll dive into some Q&A after that. It's really important to build a plan. Start off in the planning process if you're deciding to deploy iOS. Work with all the shareholders in your organization, right? Talk to your network people, talk to your execs, talk to your users, and really just map it out. Kind of say like, okay, what do I want to restrict? What do I want to enable? And then test it. Test it on your network. And finally, a note, think about iOS differently, right? Think differently on it. You want to think about what can I enable for my users versus what do I want to disable. It's a little bit of a mind shift there, especially if you're coming from like the PC world where everything's about disabling. Think of it from what do I want to enable first. Once you have a plan out, what I highly recommend doing is going through these step by step, right? You want to prepare first. You want to sign up for these deployment programs that Apple has. Test out your network. Make sure your Wi-Fi is up to snuff, and craft an Apple ID strategy. Do you want your users to have Apple IDs or not? Build out your configuration profiles, define what restrictions you want to have, build in your email accounts, and just bake these configuration profiles for your organization. Look at getting your apps. Buy all the apps that you want to have through the VPP store. Even purchase the free ones. And by purchase, I mean you just have to get licenses for these free apps so that you can assign them either to your users or to the devices. And if you go down the users path, there's an extra step that you need to do where you need to invite your users to participate in VPP. And then finally, start handing out devices to your users. And choose to enroll them via the 3 waves we talked about before. Again, highly recommend doing DEP, because if you do DEP, there's really no step 3. It's just boot up the device and walk through the setup screen. It makes it really, really easy to do. And then for ongoing support, manage these devices. Populate self-service. Make self-service important for your organization. Adjust your profiles in your apps as you need to. And lastly, learn from others. There are so many other people out there that that have deployed iOS devices, and it's great to kind of learn from their wins and their successes. And a really great way to learn from others is to check out our website called Jamf Nation. Jamf Nation is a free community-based forum that you can connect with other IT admins that are in this space, all about how to deploy either Macs or iOS devices as well too. So wrapping it up here, some next steps to take. I'd highly recommend that you reach out to us. We've got folks that are available on our chat on our online here. You can send us an email. You can give us a phone call. We've got sales and engineers that are in all different countries throughout the world, so we'd be happy to talk to you in your native language here. And if you're looking at like that step-by-step guide for how to deploy these things, we've got some of those in our resources section as well too. So highly recommend checking those out. And if you want to learn more, of course, we have a lot of different webinars online that you can dive even deeper into these things like VPP or DEP or activation lock for that matter. Thank you so much, everybody, and have a wonderful day. Take care.